We've built a lot of projects in this region, but never we seen anything this dramatic on a day-to-day basis. That's the quote Sound Transit Board Chair John Ladenburg talking about the first precast segmental project in Washington State history, as well as the longest elevated roadway in the entire Pacific Northwest, taking in at 24,746 feet. Funding for the light rail was approved back in 1996, but it took 9 years for the city and Sound Transit to work out the details of the logistics, the stops, and the routes that this thing would take. So when construction finally began in 2005, PCO was awarded the contract, but they had to do the initial segment of 755 between Tukwila Station and Boeing Field, which is right along the Duwamish wetlands, and the 518 corridor, which presented all sorts of challenges. So PCO turned to a form of ABC, accelerated bridge construction, and they chose a self-launching gantry, which was the first time it's ever been used in the entire region. So once the columns were built on 10-foot diameter drilled shafts, PCO began fabricating over 2,500 segments in a yard in Cashmere, Washington, and then had the Italian engineering company that created the truss, Rosani Dial, come over and sent a couple representatives to train a bunch of the local workers on how to use the machine, on all the ins and outs of it. And they left one guy who will never be forgotten, a guy named Vincenzo, a chain-smoking Italian engineer, to stay back and keep everybody in line.
The actual crane came from England. It came in 38 shipping containers, put on a cargo ship, and shipped across the Atlantic. It weighs, when it's all assembled, it weighs 500 tons, it's 375 feet long, 44 feet tall, 20 feet wide, and it can lift up to 80 tons.
PCO was awarded the contract with a bid of $231.7 million, which seems like a lot of money, but it's actually $40 million less than their biggest rival, Peter Kiewit, and 10% less than the estimates of the Sound Transit engineers. T.Y. Lin, engineer, designed this thing with the typical 120-foot spans, which is simply 12 10-foot wide precast segments lined up and stuck together from column to column. So when the whole thing was up, it started walking across 170 columns, some of them as high as 70 feet, all along the 4.2-mile stretch in between Tukwila Station and Rainier Beach. Each segment weighs 35 tons, but it's lifted pretty easily by the 375-foot-long gantry, which is run off of a 10-person crew, typically, superintendent and 10 people. So when you're hanging a 120-foot span every other day, laying 4.2 miles of bridge in less than a year, there's a sense of productivity that's tough to rival in this industry.
One of the more interesting parts of the project is the columns. It was this settled on a real sleek design of this thin, tall column that tapered off to the top that would tie into like a smooth transition with the V shape of the segment span cross section. But in doing so, the columns had to be ultra reinforced to the point where the point from the top was almost impractical. They came up with PCL and Stoneway got together and they came up with a system, a bottom-up system with this real self-consolidating concrete, and it turned out really nice. Almost no sag and patch involved. We made up all the architectural features of the column. So the exterior diaphragms were used at the pier segments for traverse stability, and it transfers the seismic forces to the bottom of the pier buffers. The tragedy of the whole design is that you take a 7-foot tall segment, subtract an 8-inch top slab and an 8-inch bottom slab, and you end up with about 5'8", which, for the amount of work that has to be done inside of those, with all the temporary tie-in rods. So when each segment is set, it's put together and then glued together with epoxy. One segment to the next, you start at the end, locking the first segment to the pier segment, and then constantly stuffing rods up through the soffit diaphragm. It's a design only a chiropractor could love. But Bob McDonald, the engineer, claims the value engineering saved $23 million in 8 months off the project. The type of launching gantry used was a reciprocating overhead self-launching gantry with a twin girder overhead. The twin girder overhead gantry comprises 2 triangular trusses. So they can also be an I-beam, which is heavier. It makes it so that all the joints can be machine welded. It can carry more weight, but it's also heavier. So for this design, for the size of the segments, and if it's a 35-ton segment as opposed to say a 100-ton segment, they use a twin girder overhead with 2 triangular trusses, and the connections have modular nature. So it's easier to take it apart and reconfigure it if you want to go from bridge to bridge. So where it was used before in Spain or Portugal, they want to reconfigure the design just a little bit to make the light rail work. The twin girder truss design really makes it easier. Just the modular essence of the whole thing makes it easier to reconfigure. And then the winch trolley or coil crane lifts and moves the segments into place. So they use auxiliary support. Auxiliary support legs at the end of the gantry are used to erect the pier head segments. It also repositions the crossbeam.
It can't be overstated though how much this thing reduces the carbon footprint and overall impact to the congestion of traffic in local communities. And maybe first and foremost is just waste. To anybody who ever works in the construction industry and sees the amount of waste they throw away to something this clean, we're really taking a glimpse of a sliver of what the future of the industry might look like. The whole thing was finished on time and under budget, with really, for the size of the thing, really hardly any problems. A couple of mechanical issues that had to be addressed, stopped for a day or so, and a fine for insufficient stormwater drainage. Also, there was a $3.7 million lawsuit by the workers against PCL for not trying to skip over the prevailing wage pay, but that's a whole segment of its own. When all was said and done, this thing became the vanguard, the initial segment of a 16-mile stretch in between SeaTac Airport and Westlake Center in downtown Seattle, which is just the beginning of a sprawl of light rail and train infrastructure across the region, which is always going to be debated in bars and taverns across the state. But just like they called Eisenhower a loon and crazy when he had a crazy idea to come up with the interstate highway system, back when people told him nobody would ever use it. The light rail is just going to keep growing.